Hello and welcome to the Cicada Lounge podcast. My name is Jordan Foster as always, and today we're talking with Coyote Peterson. Now, Coyote is a wildlife explorer. He is a YouTube personality that's amassed over 17 million subscribers on YouTube. What Coyote's been doing over these last few years is essentially engaging the audience around wildlife conservation and getting directly involved and getting in the mud and in the thick of it pretty much about showing these animals to you up close. We did talk about people that inspired him, people like Steven Spielberg and Bear Grylls and Steve Irwin. All of these people had big influences on Coyote Peterson and what he's been doing. He's really famous for animals stinging and biting him, but in this chat we go into a bit more of the nuances that make up what Coyote does and the channel that he hosts, which is the Brave Wilderness channel. Coyote also has a wildlife show called Brave the Wild on the Animal Planet as well, which we talk about. But yeah, we talk about obviously the bites and the stings and things like that, but he does so much work for conservation. He does so much work for engaging the youth around the world and getting them interested in wildlife conservation, you know, protecting ecosystems and protecting these amazing life forms that we've got around the world, especially in the Americas. But yeah, don't want to go on too much. We'll jump right into it.
Yeah, no, I love these. I love podcasts. Honestly, I'm trying to do more podcasts because I feel like the free-flowing conversation allows you to dive deeper into topics versus, you know, a lot of interviews the last 5 to 10 minutes where they want to know how bad was the sting of this, how bad was the sting of that. Okay, cool, sounded painful, moving on. You know, there's no like detail as to like why do some of these things happen, what sort of research do you do, what's going through your head before you go through these experiments, and whether it's sting stuff or people want to talk about the stuff that has nothing to do with the stings, which is really only about 2% of the content on our channel. So yeah, podcast setting is definitely the spot for a good conversation.
Good, yeah. I've heard so many people when you've done podcast episodes before where they've just focused on the stings, and like you've said, it's such a small part of what Brave Wilderness, the whole channel, really is.
Right.
Some of my favorites are when you've been interacting with wild animals, like the famous ocelot encounter that you had. Wild ocelot just wants to have a bit of a play. That's insane. Those kinds of things are what really, I don't know. It seems to me since I was in school, there's been a real lack of presenters getting in and amongst the animals, and there's been a lot of focus, which I really like, of people just observing the behavior with no human interaction whatsoever. But I think having that human element, which you provide big time, really just gets you involved, and you feel the energy and you're so excited. And I know that you've got loads of comparisons with Steve Irwin, but it really is that fluidity and the flow, and you just get really passionate about the animals, and there's a wolverine right there in your face and you can't help but like feel the energy coming off you, and I think that really excites people. So yeah, I consider you an educator, really, mate.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, you know, it's always quite the honor to ever be put in the same sentence with somebody like Steve Irwin. Obviously, he was a huge inspiration for me. I've watched pretty much every hour of animal-based edutainment that's been produced, from the days of Marlon Perkins and Jim Fowler doing Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, right through, you know, the new Planet Earth and Blue Planet and Our Planet specials. I can't even keep them all straight these days, how many different ones there are, but I'll just classify those as the David Attenborough realm versus the Steve Irwin versus the old school type stuff. And, you know, we really try to put ourselves somewhere right in the middle, I think. You know, what Steve was so good at was really getting you as a viewer to feel engaged with what it was you were learning. And the key word is learning. So I'm glad you used the word educator, because that's what I consider myself first and foremost. I mean, yeah, I could just go out and shoot beautiful cinematography of animals and write you a script, but they're doing such a good job of that with Planet Earth. I would just be like, you know, the poor man's version trying to come up on the heels of that. Whereas, you know, Bear Grylls did a phenomenal job with what he accomplished with Man versus Wild, we saw that and we said, this is perfect. The fast-paced camera and editing style, the engrossing music, but bears killing and eating the animals. So how do we take the Steve Irwin element and work that into the same form of Man versus Wild and create the new version of what Steve Irwin's show might have been had it been produced in, the late 2000s. So that's essentially how we came up with the formula.
That's brilliant. That's really cool. Another, when you compare, people that are fans of yours obviously probably have heard of Steve Irwin too.
Mm-hmm.
But early 2000s, Steve Irwin and your production value, there's such a juxtaposition between how far ahead the technology has come, really. And that's actually another thing I wanted to chat to you about, because everyone knows the guy that gets stung by like killer hornets and things like that. But it's the people behind the camera that I'm very impressed with, because they've got to keep up with you. And you're a lightning bolt.
That's a huge part of it. My team is incredibly versatile. And I mean, we're a very small team, and the way that we accomplish these episodes is it's a true creative process. We approach every episode just like it's an independent film, and we have story structure, forethought. I mean, these things don't just randomly happen. Encounters with animals randomly happen, but you have to be prepared for those moments to happen so that everybody's firing on all 12 cylinders when that moment occurs naturally in the wild.
Right, I see, yeah. Because you, like myself, have got a bit of a background in media production, film production and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing you pretty much just went from, I've got all of this knowledge in my head, and I imagine you bumped into a few like-minded people. You started experimenting with you being in front of the camera, and because there's so much different in interesting wildlife species in the South Americas and the North Americas as well. Right. And why not? I don't see enough documentary style filmmaking on North American animals, really. There's so many different ecosystems that you can explore. I mean, I rewatched the one where you were exploring at night and you bumped into I think it was a gar, not an alligator gar, but it was
spotted gar.
That's it, the spotted gar, yeah. And it seems like they're everywhere. And then that led me down a rabbit hole. And then I found out about the huge alligator gar, which was then persecuted I think it was the 1800s, early 1900s, for killing children. Even though alligator gars only really go after prey items they know they can swallow whole. Right. It's that kind of enthusiasm, I think, that you're really good at invigorating in people, especially the younger generations.
Wait just a couple of weeks till you see our 2-part alligator gar episode that launches the beginning of October. It's called Gar Wars. So we thematically built the whole thing off of, Star Wars. And there's a huge battle going on right now between conservationists for these fish and people that are bow hunting, essentially shooting these fish with bows and arrows with no limits placed around them, because right now alligator gar are not listed as a game fish species. Wow. Which most fish are game fish. They're considered trash fish, which means you can pretty much go out into the environment and kill as many of them as you want at any time of the year. So it's a big conservation piece for us. It's definitely going to ruffle some feathers in like the bow fishing industry, but these things are ancient. They're living dinosaurs in their own right. And if we don't have protections on animals like these, they're going to get eradicated off the face of the planet for no reason. There are no reports of alligator gar ever truly biting a human. And we show you how docile these fish truly are. So anybody that thinks, I was bitten by an alligator gar, Jeremy Wade did episodes on it for River Monsters. It ended up being alligators, true American alligators, that were the run-ins people had with these fish. The only time where a bite has ever happened is fishermen trying to remove hooks from their mouths in the process of catching them. So, one of these vilified species that just needs to be put in the right light, basically.
Yeah, I totally understand. And also, that's another good thing about what you do and your channel is removing all of these crazy myths surrounding certain animals and bringing them into a new light. And I mean, to say that the alligator gar was persecuted is an understatement, really. They
Really.
they electrocuted entire river systems, didn't they? And like absolutely decimated local fish populations just to find an alligator gar. And the alligator gar has never, like you said, ever killed anyone, let alone hurt anyone.
It's people not understanding or doing enough research. People choose to destroy things before they choose to learn and understand about them. And we feel that's such a big part of the Brave Wilderness channel. And whether it's something like alligator gar, or even, you know, some of our more popular content with things that I'm bitten and stung by, to show people how difficult it is, first of all, to have an interaction with one of these animals. I have to physically go searching, sometimes for days, if not weeks, to come across a species, let alone be able to catch it and then physically put it in a situation where it wants to sting or bite me. So, you know, a big part of it is to show people that these things are way more afraid of us than we should ever be of them.
Yeah, totally agree. How would you go about catching an alligator gar? Because I mean, like their scales, just grabbing one the wrong way.
A research group at Texas A&M University in Texas. The location's top secret where they're doing their research. But we use something called gill nets, which are these huge nets that we stretch across the length of a river system. And eventually a fish swims into it, and then it's game on. And without necessarily giving anything away, we caught and recorded and filmed the largest alligator gar to ever be featured in anything. River monsters, we tripled the size of the alligator gar that Jeremy Wade caught, if that gives you some context.
Oh, that's insane.
It's huge.
And that was a beast that he caught.
Biggest, yeah. Well, we tripled it. So, you know, I love Jeremy Wade. He's one of my idols. And we give a couple of shout outs to Jeremy at different points throughout the gar episodes that we did. I think if he sees this episode, he would truly be proud of what this fish is that we landed.
Wow, that's insane. Because I mean, like on what an alligator gar can reach, what 12 foot, something like that? How many?
There's rumors of them being that big. The world record caught on rod and reel, I think, was about 375 pounds. It was like 10 feet in length.
Wow.
So ours fell short of the world record, but not by much when it came to the record in Texas, believe it or not. So it's a big fish. When you see it, it's like we caught a dinosaur. The genuine excitement that comes out in the moment of us actually landing this fish and then me getting to be with it in the water. I mean, its head is 2.5 feet in length alone. So it's a big animal.
That's insane. Yeah, that is insane.
It's impressive.
Wow, that's crazy. I'll look at subscribe, like and subscribe. Anyone who's listening right now, I can't wait to see that episode. Click the bell. Oh, that's ridiculous. I mean, I knew it's shows like River Monsters as well is also, I know that it has monsters in the title, but Jeremy Wade, like yourself, does a really good job at dispelling these kind of myths about certain freshwater fish and saltwater fish. Like you've got what is it, bull sharks that manage to make their way up freshwater river systems and things like that.
And, you know, bull sharks are arguably very dangerous. When it comes to the shark world, I would say a bull shark is much more dangerous than a great white shark. You're more likely to be bitten by a bull shark because of the water systems they'll get into and because of their exploratory nature, right? A shark bites something to test it. But we as humans are basically made like a stick of butter. We're like the weakest animal on the planet when it comes to a shark biting you. It's like game over. If a bull shark decides to taste your leg, oh, you're in some serious trouble. But, you know, there are also a lot of times in very murky waters. So the shark can't necessarily see what it is that it's going after. The same way that surfers end up getting tagged by great white sharks from underneath. A surfboard with human limbs off the side of it looks a lot like a sea lion.
Seal, yeah.
That's what great white sharks are feasting on. If it's a tiger shark, they feast on sea turtles primarily. So from the underside, it looks like a sea turtle. And it's that initial catastrophic bite that can be so detrimental to a human that's what makes us afraid. And it's not, really taking the time to understand that, like, look, I'm not saying anything against people that go surfing. It's a wonderful sport. But these people that surf are taking a risk. They know the risk that they're taking. You enter into that animal's world and you put yourself in the position of prey, let alone make yourself look like prey. I mean, you're only upping your chances to be bitten by something. So, with risk comes reward, or comes the end, I guess. It's if you love surfing, you're taking those risks.
That's it. Just make sure you've got a camera on you.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's these kind of dangerous or supposedly dangerous animals. Like I've only just been made aware of this. Apparently this was a phenomena in America, but there was this whole killer hornet craze that was going around that was really heavily perpetuated by the media.
Yeah.
And I found again one of your videos to help dispel the whole thing. So what species is it? Is it a giant Japanese hornet, or is it a Eurasian hornet?
The Asian giant hornet breaks down into a couple of different species, basically. The largest one is the Japanese giant hornet. There's also one in China and one in Japan, and they're, the science aspects of how they differentiate is, potato at the end of the day.
Yeah.
The one that I was stung by is technically considered the second largest, though. The one in China is a little bit bigger. But again, I mean, you're splitting millimeters at the end of the day when you're comparing the two. And it is an incredibly painful sting. It is a very dangerous insect. They estimate somewhere between 30 and 40 people die yearly from the stings of this insect. As far as it breaks down with the nickname murder hornet and them invading the United States, it is so incredibly unlikely that a population, or populations, I should say, would create a stronghold. That it's all hype, but I guess it sells, ad space and blog titles and stuff like that. And certainly from our perspective, we were able to utilize putting out some additional content surrounding the murder hornet, and even went as far as to film an episode that released recently on something called the cicada killer, which is a large sand wasp species in the United States that people are misidentifying as being an invasive giant hornet. So right. I came out of sting retirement to be stung by that, mostly to show people that it's not a giant hornet, but also because I'd never been stung by it, and we wanted to show people that the sting really isn't that bad. Nowhere close to that of the giant hornet.
Right. Okay. Good. Well, that's a relief, sort of. But yeah, this whole coming out of retirement thing. Do you think that's going to be permanent, or is it just for the cicada killer?
Well, as far as the stings go, yes, I'm not going to be stung by other stuff. We've kicked around the concept of getting stung by things that are not painful. Your backyard insects, like a common hornet or a normal paper wasp, a bumblebee, just to like show kids, look, if you are stung, it's really not that bad. But I'm not sure we're ever going to necessarily go in that direction just for the sake of people being like, oh, you're doing it for views. I mean, we're really not doing it for views. We did a lot of the sting episodes to show people these insects, to bring them into the spotlight and really take them out of a negative stance that a lot of people had. When it comes to the bites, we definitely have some more bites that are coming. We're actually experimenting with a series we're developing called Eaten Alive. We filmed 2 episodes in the Eaten Alive series thus far, piranhas and sea lamprey. So both of those are coming out in November and December, and oh buddy, are they entertaining. It's probably some of the best stuff we've done yet. So bites are more of an experiment where it's like, well, I'm never going to be bitten intentionally by a shark or a lion or a bear or some of the things that people suggest, but we really hone in on some of those creepy crawly things where it's like, well, what happens if you put your hands into a tank full of piranha? Are they going to eat you or are they not? So let's just say most of these episodes are guaranteed to have a little bit of blood. So
yeah. Oh, magical way of putting it. I mean, I suppose it depends on the piranha species. From what we've seen, especially on if you're a fan of river monsters and things like that, they tend to be pretty docile and over only really go after prey items that seem to be struggling or in some kind of distress or had been injured before. Not to burst the bubble.
A big thing with the Eaten Alive series, again, is to find out, are these animals really aggressive toward humans? Do they have a taste for flesh and blood? Or are a lot of these instances where a bite happens or something else happens, is it mistaken identity? Is it a rumor? Is it a misnomer? Like, again, like Jeremy Wade, it's dispelling a lot of these myths while also giving you a really up close, cool look at these creatures and a solid action-packed education, possibly a conservation message or possibly a message of what people are doing to control certain species. The sea lamprey is a great example. That's the script I'm in the process of writing right now. We filmed the episode last week. There are major invasive species in the Great Lakes here in the United States, and they've decimated the fishery industry. So again, it's how are teams controlling the populations of lamprey, and are they something that we as humans need to be afraid of when we go swimming in the Great Lakes?
Wow. Fair enough. I mean, lamprey are pretty common around the British Isles. And wow, there's not a lot much going for the British Isles in terms of deadliness. If you've been to Great Britain, you'll probably know that the only native venomous like snake species is the adder, which is Viperus berus. There's not a lot of killiness around. I mean, we get the odd great white sharks, and people are scared, a little bit scared shitless about the basking shark, just because they're huge, just because they're big, pretty much. Right. And you see them all the time. I live on the south coast. I live next to a city called Brighton, and you get basking sharks moving and finding plankton shoals and things like that, and other small invertebrates to eat up and down the south coast. But aside from dangerous animals, Great Britain and quite a few other different European countries doesn't really have that much going for it. Right. I wonder what makes it. I wonder why America and South America, because I mean, even North America's got like diamondback rattlesnakes and things like that, which can really mess you up pretty quick. I wonder what it is about the Americas that just holds all of these really fiercely competitive animals and ecosystems that develop all these crazy.
The thing that I always liken it to, and I'm literally writing this into the script about the sea lamprey right now, is it's Hollywood. People love horror films. People want to be afraid of things. It's almost like we do this to ourselves. And I think people are more afraid of the things that are bizarre or alien looking than they are the things that are a clear picture. I mean, you can go back to 1975 when Steven Spielberg and Universal released Jaws. I mean, people were afraid of sharks before Jaws, but man, people were really afraid of sharks.
Yeah, they were.
And when you look at something like the sea lamprey, here's a creature that looks like an alien. It's got a mouth with 150 needle-sharp teeth, and then a tongue that's like a razor-sharp cheese grater. And their story is that they suction onto fish, drill a hole in them, and then suck out their blood and bodily fluids. I mean, dude, that's a Hollywood horror film right there. So then imagine me putting my hands into an aquarium with 100 of them and then inducing a suction. And we did suctions on my wrist, my stomach, and my neck. And oh man, this episode is going to make people's skin crawl. And it is not comfortable to have these things suction onto you, twist their heads, and start to go to work. But the real experiment is, do they want to eat human blood, or are they only interested in fish blood? So that's what this episode will ultimately test out. And like I said, there will be blood. These people are alive when these things begin to eat you, that's for sure. So it's pretty horrific in its own right.
Can't wait. Yeah, well, not if you're like hemophobic, maybe don't tune into that, seeing as they literally drain your blood dry. But no.
It's not every day that we know that an episode is going to do fantastic, but with the sea lamprey one, yeah, this one's going to be a screamer. That's for sure.
I can't wait. Is this one going to be one of your longer ones, like the Wolverine episode?
Yeah, the sea lampreys actually breaks down. It's going to be a 2-part episode. So something we've been experimenting with on the channel has been releasing an episode earlier in the week and then the second part of it on a Saturday. And what's cool about that is that then we can combine those episodes together so they make one part, and we release then a third time down the road. It's kind of a re-release, and sometimes the audience gets a little bit like, I've seen this before. But every time you release an episode, you're drawing a new audience to the channel. So we love the ability to reconnect episodes that are broken down into two parts strategically. It kind of makes for that, I don't know, as for the filmmaker side of me, loves experimenting with like the original and the sequel and like how you can follow things up. So it's more of a filmmaking tactic that we experiment with than like trying to like milk the audience for something.
Yeah. And this also seems like it's heading in a direction where there's going to be endless new content possibilities, which is fish. Fish, I think, was not a criticism. It was slightly lacking on the channel, but now I think that you guys are delving more into it. It's just because like filming fish is it's a new environment. There's loads of other technical problems that you've got to overcome. It's normal. But I think that now that you're going into like lampreys and different fish species and piranhas and things like that, there's a whole new world, literally a whole new world opens up for like you diving and you being bitten by things. Well,
We
yeah.
also strategically did that to give a little space between River Monsters and its final season doing its run and, you know, what Jeremy's doing with his career. I mean, you know, he set the bar with what River Monsters was in the television space. But truth be told, there's no fish content that's getting massive views on the internet anywhere. You know, I mean, Jeremy's not going out and being like, all right, I'm going to make River Monsters now for the internet. And we're not trying to recreate River Monsters by any means whatsoever. We're looking to team up with the right conservation groups, dispel some of those similar myths that Jeremy touched on, but also really give you a deeper dive look into the life cycle of these fish and the conservation work that's needed to keep these species here. I would say my biggest gripe that I ever had with River Monsters was you just never saw enough of the fish. You know, it's like you saw the fish at the very end for 2 minutes and then it was let go. You didn't get enough of that fish's life history and the importance of the conservation that I think we're going to really try to focus in on. So yeah, fish are going to start making a stronger appearance on the Brave Wilderness channel. We have several episodes already outlined for next year that we plan on trying to produce surrounding fish. So it'll be cool.
Cool. No, I can't wait for that. No, I totally agree with you with that gripe. You didn't see enough of the fish at the end products. Like a good example of what you see it all the time on the advertising is the Goliath tigerfish, and it is a ferocious looking fish, really is. But you only really saw it for a few minutes, and then it ended up being carved up by the villagers anyway. Yeah, no, bit of sweet ending, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
was. I can only imagine in post-production when they got that episode back into post
Yeah.
and, you know, they're looking at it like, oh my gosh, like we spent all this time to catch this fish. And I can only imagine the situation Jeremy and the crew were in where it's like, dude, you're with a bunch of local villagers.
What do you do?
Like, we're going to take your fish.
Yeah.
Or you're not leaving here with this footage. I mean, you know, we've been in some rather hostile situations ourselves where it's like, oh man, are we going to get our gear confiscated? Like,
Really?
in that moment. So they were probably like, well, I guess the thing that we have to do is give up the fish. And I'm sure the team was, you know, running like crazy in post-production, be like, all right, we got to put the right spin on this because we don't ever show an animal getting injured or killed or something like that, but we got to put the episode out. So I imagine that must have been pretty tough for them.
Yeah, I bet. You mentioned that you nearly had your stuff confiscated. Have you ever had any run-ins with like country officials and things like that?
Oh, I got held up at gunpoint and led down to the side of a river filled with crocodiles at gunpoint in Costa Rica. And I've never been more afraid in my life. I honestly thought I was going to be shot and thrown in the river to eat my crocodiles, me and my crew. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has happened. This is actually before the Brave Wilderness channel was a YouTube channel and we were developing the series. It was the first time I traveled internationally to film anything, and I was in Costa Rica. And long story short, there were some miscommunications that happened between the producers I was working with and the police officers that were watching our production vehicles. And we ended up getting taken hostage by a militia group. And they thought that we were poaching a farmer's cattle, which we're trying to explain that that's not what was happening. And then to prove that we were not killing cattle, myself and one of my producers was led down to a river with automatic weapons in the dark, a river filled with crocodiles, and walked up and down the river to prove that we had not been poaching cattle. I thought for sure we were getting shot and thrown in that river. Yeah, it was
Wow.
terrifying.
Yeah, no, what a terrifying sounds like an understatement. Jeez, yeah. No one can
Well,
say you're not dedicated, Coyote.
when you have people pointing automatic weapons or holding, like my one crew member had a 9mm held to the side of his head to force over like giving up like the camera gear. Like they wanted to look at the footage that we had because they thought, oh yeah, you guys are filming yourselves killing this guy's cattle. I mean, dude, it was a crazy situation. I mean, like I said, I've never been more afraid for my life than I was in that moment. And I was like, oh my gosh, now I want a job traveling internationally as an animal adventure host. Is this a good idea? So yeah, it was pretty extreme.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. All right, any of those crew members filming that episode with you now?
Oh yeah, three of the guys that were on a part of that trip are still with my full-time team today. Yeah.
Oh, hats off to them. Oh, Jesus Christ. Well, I'm glad nothing happened. That would have been disastrous. But yeah,
The news for us is that we had permission to be where we were, and we were in fact filming B-roll of the crocodiles on the river. So
yeah.
when it checked out that we were not the people that had been poaching cattle, it was okay, cool. But we were told, and when I say militia group, they call themselves the environmental police. Dude, it was 4 dudes in black outfits with automatic weapons in a black SUV. I mean, no official badges, no nothing. And it was just like, all right, we're going to get robbed for something here. We don't know what they're going to take. Hopefully it's not our lives. They ended up taking pretty much like the equivalent of like $150 American cash. And that was it. They didn't take our cameras. They didn't take anything. They were pretty much like, get out of here. If we ever see you again, it's going to be trouble. So
Wow.
Crazy, right?
Have you ever been back to Costa Rica?
Yes, many times. But I don't film in that spot anymore.
Yeah.
I learned my lesson.
I'll say, yeah. It reminds me of this little story that David Attenborough told, where he was in some far-flung heart of darkness around the world, and he was stood in the middle of a trail. I think it might have been New Guinea, actually. It rings a bell. But it was black and white film, I think. And then you see these hundreds of tribesmen charge down the hill with shields, spears, brandishing, with war cries, charging at David Attenborough. The shot of him stood there. And then he started walking steadily towards them the last couple of feet as they ran towards him. And he stuck out his hand and went, "How do you do?" in very British fashion, and shook their hand. And that was it. The friendship was made. All it took was that man's balls of steel, and the production crew and David didn't die.
That's sometimes what it takes. You know, after our experience in Costa Rica, we are very, very careful with how we plan trips, in the connections that we make on the ground in countries before we actually get there, to figure out where it is that we're going to film. I mean, a lot of stuff on YouTube that people do, I feel, is very fly by the seat of your pants, where like people might not get the right permits. And, you know, I'm talking about people that might do skateboarding videos or prank videos and stuff like that. But we cross every T and dot every I. We get permits to interact with the animals that we film. We have professionals that we work with on the ground. I mean, we go to the umpteenth degree with precautions to make sure that our crews are safe when we're filming our content.
I believe it. I totally believe it. I mean, if looking at your content from its aesthetics, pretty much, you would assume that all of the right precautions have been made in, like post-production, production, all of that kind of thing. So yeah, totally believe that. And obviously you've got connections to the Discovery Planet and things like that. So you're not very TV, but you do things by the book, which is really, really good.
Well, when we produced the series Brave the Wild for Animal Planet, and when you're producing for television, even versus
Animal Planet, sorry,
it's an entirely different world of legalities that you have to cover. I mean, remember, you know, Animal Planet's owned by Discovery Communications. It's one of the many brands underneath their banners. So, you know, they're a massive company. So they have to do everything by the book. They can't risk, you know, having one of their production teams or show hosts running around out there in the wild doing crazy stuff without permits, because that's going to blow back on them if they find themselves in any sort of legal heat. So yeah, we're very careful, not only for YouTube, but when we produce the TV series, to make sure we did everything by the book.
Yeah, no, that's great. I said discovery, I meant animal.
I knew what you
The
meant.
Yeah, no, good. As long as someone did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this this whole bringing the production value of TV to YouTube is something that I haven't seen really before, aside from one or two anomalies that have happened on YouTube. They've got nothing to do with animal conservation or animal awareness of any kind. What do you think is the future for showing and educating the public about animals and biodiversity, aside from your own channel? That is, do you think that there's a future, or do you think you're sort of an anomaly in your own right?
Well, there's definitely a future when it comes to where is this content going to be distributed. I mean, I'm front and center to always say it's the digital space. I mean, I can tell you very openly that, you know, we're not in contract with Animal Planet anymore at this point. We had a phenomenal experience getting to produce Brave the Wild, but you know, my biggest gripe about the release of that show was the lack of audience that it was reaching. I mean,
Yeah.
half of my audience on YouTube doesn't even know that we had a TV show. I still have people being like, Coyote, you need a TV show. I'm like, dude, I produced 18 of the best hours of animal adventure content that's been produced of all time, you know, production quality and the stories and whatnot. You know, I mean, we really took it to a next level as compared to what we did on the YouTube channel. But the problem is there's not enough people watching cable television these days for that to have a viable future. People are watching in the digital space, and the attention span that we all have, which is continuing to be limited, I mean, myself included. If I start watching a series and I get bored 20 minutes in, I'm like, I'm going to have to find something else to watch. So with YouTube, we're giving you a story of an animal, or we're introducing you to an animal or showing you an environment 10 to 15 minutes tops. That's kind of the amount of time people have for something like that. You know, I love River Monsters. I've watched every episode at least 2, if not 3 times, because I love that series. But if you were to try to launch River Monsters today in the landscape as it currently exists, forget about it. Not going to be successful, not going to be effective. People don't have time to sit through commercials, and people don't have time to spend 45 minutes to see 2 minutes of a fish. They want their cake and they want it now. And the faster you can get it to them, the better your chance of them being like, sweet, that was awesome. What else you got for me? Oh, this thing? Sweet. Okay, give me the next one, next one, next one. And if you can watch 5 different animals in 50 minutes versus 45 minutes for one fish species, and I'm just using River Monsters as my easiest example, you're going to reach more people and more species more quickly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, everyone knows that attention spans are shortening and shortening and shortening.
Yeah.
But yeah, like bang on what you said. I mean, my favorite episode from River Monsters, and we're going to use River Monsters as the example, right? So is the death ray. So death, like the giant freshwater stingray that they found within that river system. What country was it? I've completely forgotten. It's not Thailand.
Thailand, yeah.
Was it Thailand? Right. Okay. So that was amazing. I didn't know freshwater stingrays could get that big. I knew that manta rays could and things like that, but that had me on the edge of my seat all the way through. That said, all of the other episodes, and I have watched all series of River Monsters like you have. That's the only one that really held my attention for that long. Quite a lot of the time I skipped halfway through the episode, and that shows a bit of an issue, really. I mean, what do you do aside from making shorter amounts of content? If you've got the production value to do so, and if you've got the people behind you, and you've got all the editors that can push out an episode as fast as you can, where do you go? I mean, you're the benchmark essentially. People have got to compete with you, and we're talking about in terms of YouTube. It's consistency and how many times you can push out good quality content.
Yep.
And that's difficult for someone that's not got a a large crew, I suppose. So what would you say to those people like myself who are dabbling in trying to talk about environmentalism and animal species and things like that, who
Well,
don't have that kind of crew?
what I would say is, I started from exactly the same spot that any of these people started, right? So you hit two of them right off the bat. The quality is extremely important. The quantity is another important aspect. Like, how much of something can you produce? And it's difficult, especially if you're, listening to this podcast, you think to yourself, oh, I can never get started. How will I ever build and start my own channel? All it takes is you and a camera. When we started Brave Wilderness, it was myself and my business partner, Mark Vins, and the two of us spent years going out and producing content. It was the two of us, and we had two other people that came with us part-time. We paid them tiny amounts of money to be a part of some productions just so we'd have another camera. I edited every single episode for the first 2 years of the Brave Wilderness channel. I write all of the voiceover scripts still to this day. You have to really want to do it. So it's the quantity, it's the quality, and it's the consistency. That's the big thing, is how do you keep that train rolling? Brave Wilderness just turned 6 years old, September 15th, and we have uploaded at least one piece of content pretty much every single week for 6 straight years, and at a minimum one piece, on average 2 to 3 pieces. So at this point, we have 621 videos, I think, that we have released on the Brave Wilderness channel. Mm-hmm. And that consistency is what allowed the channel to build the way that it did. And that production quality that, again, comes from certainly my background as a screenwriter, producer, and director, and the rest of my team also having that filmmaking background. We understood that it was a good narrative story that was going to keep our audience engaged. And when you put that production value on it, it sets you apart from the rest of the pack. And that's not to diminish anything that other YouTubers are creating, because everybody, creates their art with their own passion ingrained into it. But there are very few YouTubers that are traveling the world to produce content and put it together the way that we do. But when it comes to animals and adventure, this is the only way that we could do it. I mean, I could sit in my office and talk to you for 15 minutes about the alligator gar, but that's not going to show you the environment. It's not going to show you how this thing survives, and it's not going to get this thing up close for the cameras.
That's very true. Yeah, very true. And there's another thing that also just occurred to me, which is all about production and presentation, I suppose, is you pretty much. How did your style, your presenting style, first emerge? Because you're really good at storytelling. Like, even now, it feels like that you're talking to, like, giving peace to camera, and we're just having a chat. But I'm just going, oh wow, that's so interesting. I mean, lamprey, wow, that's really cool. All that kind of stuff. It just feels like that you've been reading off a script that you've written, but you're just talking about something that you're very passionate about. Where does that kind of, I know that you're passionate about wildlife and that helps a great deal, but where does that presenting skill come from?
To be honest with you, I don't know where the presenting skill comes from, because I'm not a person. When I was in college, I never took acting classes, I never had any interest in being in front of the camera. But I spent a lot of time really researching the art of Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. I call it Spielbergian theory. It's my own made up term that I use sometimes.
I like it.
I really studied the art form that he perfectly crafted of how to get somebody engaged in motion picture. And then I apply that to everything that we do in the field, everything we do in post-production, but even the way that I try to present myself in public as a persona, right? Coyote Peterson is a persona in his own right. I mean, I don't consider myself an actor by any means. I don't memorize lines before I go into the field. Mm-hmm. I educate myself about a subject matter and then connect those pieces in my head as I'm flowing along, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm never going to be perfect. And I'll do occasionally, we'll be like, oh, cool. That was a great idea. Let's say that again and say it like this, just like you would do on a movie set. Because when a good director is working with actors, you give them a script as a rubric, right? And say, this is the idea. Here's some of the words we want you to hit. How do you turn that into an organized improv? Go back and watch something like Jaws or Jurassic Park. These famous Spielberg films where certainly they had scripts, but they couldn't have known how to perfectly present every one of these elements. You go back and watch some of the mannerisms of Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. Like, did Spielberg direct him to do those things, or did he naturally make those choices as Goldblum to be like, this is what I have to add to that character? So I think about all those things when we are doing these episodes, when I'm in a podcast, when I'm in a late night show, whatever it might be. How do you bring that ultimate level of entertainment and engagement to the audience and hope that it works? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Well said. Well presented. And also, speaking of presentation, I really appreciate you on a podcast wearing your trademark hat.
Well, because like you said, if this is going to go out on your YouTube channel,
Yeah.
if I'm wearing just a baseball cap and you're using this to market, like the cowboy hat was hugely influenced by Indiana Jones, which that franchise is one of my favorites. Again, back to Spielberg. And what we recognized about that was, I'm a white dude living in Ohio in the United States. Like, it doesn't get more basic than that. How do you stand out to be something unique amongst, the amazing list of characters that have been animal adventure presenters? And we said, well, let's give you a look that people will be able to recognize. And the cowboy hat certainly became signature with that. I loved all the gear that Bear Grylls always had, so I borrowed that element from him. And it was a matter of creating a human action figure out of myself to be like, I'm going to be an animal adventure dude that is just as passionate about these things as Steve Irwin, but has the look of Indiana Jones.
Yeah, well, it totally works, to be fair. It really is a bit iconic these days. I mean, you can't think of Brave Wilderness Coyote Peterson without imagining the hat, pretty much. Right. Yeah, well, so exactly the same.
Going back to what you were saying about other people wanting to start YouTube channels, all of these things that I'm sharing with you, you have to remember at one point in time, they happened with me having no subscriber base on YouTube and no millions and billions of views on YouTube. So it was literally just an idea on paper that started to take shape as we were like, cool, let's go out in the swamps and catch another snapping turtle. Let's do this with your costume design. Get better at talking about the snapping turtle. Like, I can't tell you how many common snapping turtles I caught on camera that nobody's ever seen, because we practiced and we did it over and over and over again to be like, get better at talking on camera, get better at knowing the facts about the turtle, until finally we had an opportunity to put something out there to the world. And we tried to get a TV show for 3 years before we ever launched the YouTube channel, but everybody was like, nah, dude, nobody's interested in an animal adventure show host. They tried it with Steve Irwin. We know what happened. It's over. It's planet Earth now. No one's ever going to pay attention to a guy presenting animals again. We just refuse to believe that. And if you, took the fact that it was tragic that we lost Steve Irwin, do you think Steve Irwin wanted all the rest of us to just quit? Was he like, all right, I lost my life in the process of educating people, promoting conservation, so I never want anybody else to go and do it? No. How do you carry on somebody's legacy unless you follow in those footsteps? And I hope that somebody eventually is out there right now practicing to follow in my footsteps, because the YouTube space is the best place to do that. There's no executives telling you what you can and can't do. When we try to launch a TV show, we pitched to every network and they were like, no, that's not what's interesting now. We don't want to do that.
Typical.
Well, Brave Wilderness is bigger than any one of those television networks at this point that distributes animal adventure content. We dwarf them in the number of views and the number of people that we reach on a daily basis. So where I'll go with that is just saying, believe in yourself, go out there and do it, and you can make it happen. Because I was just like everybody else when we started Brave Wilderness. No subscribers, nothing other than my knowledge of how to tell stories, basically.
That's it. I mean, 17 million plus subscribers, boy. How do you beat that? They can't compete with your numbers. I mean, if anyone's listening right now, by the way, what me and Coyote are really saying is pick up a camera. If you've got some kind of interest in the natural world, I implore you, and I'm sure you do as well, just pick up a camera, because everyone starts somewhere. I mean, you started, like you've said a few times now, you started with 0 subscribers. You
Right.
started hatless. You started, right at the bottom, just like everyone else. It just takes your enthusiasm, your dedication, and obviously a little bit of knowledge and passion about the subject.
And the thing that I think we're beginning to recognize as a brand, because what you just said is like, oh, nobody will catch us. They may or they may not. I'm eager to see somebody come out and make a run at building a channel the size of ours. But we are very much in tune with, maybe we're the channel that is going to bring the next big animal adventure show host to the table. And it's a concept that we've already got in the works now, that don't be surprised within the next couple of years if you don't see a pretty substantial series and competition that is launched to give somebody that next opportunity. I mean, I would love to make it to where David Attenborough is at someday, where I get to narrate awesome wildlife documentaries. Right now, at my age and my physical ability, I can still get in the mud and do these things, but I also don't want to just be this guy forever. I want somebody else to have that chance. We want to foster the next generation. I mean, when I was getting started, I would think to myself, well, why not me? Why doesn't Bear Grylls look me up and be like, dude, I'm going to get on board and executive produce a show for you because I'm Bear Grylls and you can be Coyote Peterson and I'm going to help you out. And, we never approached Bear to ask him if he would do that. So I'm not trying to throw him under the bus. I absolutely love Bear. But we look at that to be like, everybody's always so concerned of like me, I want to be at the top, but why? Like, why aren't we always looking for who's going to be the next best? And I think that's the approach that Brave Wilderness is now beginning to investigate and look for. Like, we want to foster the next generation of animal adventure show hosts. And if that involves me physically training somebody, them shadowing the work that I do and priming them and apprenticing them into that role to create more shows, that's what we're going to do.
Right. Cool. That be an excellent place to, I think, begin to wrap up the podcast. A bit of optimism finally on this podcast, because it just, the chances are, I don't know if you've heard a few of the episodes before, we just end up talking about deforestation and how biodiversity is slowly crumbling away, but a bit of optimism about really enjoying the natural world, especially while we've got it, is a great place to end. Just before we go, I know for a fact that you've got a few books out, quite a few books actually, to be fair. What have you got going on that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, well, certainly when it comes to the end of this year, when we went and produced the television series, a lot of people, at least our audience on YouTube, was like, Coyote, you're putting all the best content on the TV show. We want more on YouTube. The best content we have produced in 6 years thus far on the Brave Wilderness channel is about to drop in the last 3 months of this year. Like, I'm so excited for the content that we have coming out, starting with the first weekend in October. So there are some really big episodes coming. My newest book, actually I have one right here, The Beast of Bites, just launched as well. So that is now available. It's the follow-up to The King of Sting and chronicles some of my craziest bites. And other than that, I'd say just stay tuned to the Brave Wilderness channel. We got lots of big stuff coming, especially heading into 2021. Some big production trips on the horizon. And
for God's sakes, like and subscribe. Cool. Thank you so much, Coyote, for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. It's good to talk to an American. You're so optimistic about everything.
I really am, man. I guess the last thing that I'll say in regards to like the future of conservation in wildlife and just everything that is our planet is, I look at myself as somebody who's paving a road, right? Like, I'm doing everything that I can to get kids and their families excited about animals. There's a lot of conservation efforts that Brave Wilderness wants to get even more heavily involved in. But I know that we're going to start that movement, and it's these kids that are learning from the animals today, even watching a podcast like this, that are going to find that inspiration the same way that I found it in Steven Spielberg and Bear Grylls and Steve Irwin, to be like, how do you take that to the next level? So it's about fostering the future generations to be like, you guys are going to be the ones that make the difference to save this planet, because somebody has to do it, and it's going to be them, because it's in a lot of trouble right now. I won't shy away from saying that. And the more that we can bring that to the forefront and get people excited and encouraged to change the future, the better the future is going to be for their future generations.
Exactly. I mean, you've got a daughter. Is it just a daughter right now? I've got a son and a daughter, and it is definitely their generation that is gonna, it's gonna be so aware. I mean, me and you, we weren't really told that too much about the environment and the plight of all animals on Earth and how human civilization has had such an impact on the natural world.
Right.
But we are running out of time, so we'll definitely leave it there. But I got to say, thank you so much, mate, for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime you want to have me back on, I'd be more than happy to dedicate some time. We'll talk some crazy stuff.
Yes, definitely will. Definitely will. And we'll have to catch up after this next real like gold dust content that you're about to release. I'll definitely be in touch.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you, mate. Have a great day.
Thanks so much for having me. Talk soon.
That was brilliant. I really, really enjoyed that chat. Wow. So much to unpack, really. Thank you so much, Coyote, for coming on the podcast. I really can't wait to have you back on, mate. That was really, really cool. Thank you so much. If you guys want to know what Coyote's been getting up to recently, and you really want to check out what he was talking about, all this amazing content that's going to come out on his channel, check out the Brave Wilderness YouTube channel. Click the link. I'll have the link in the description. Please subscribe, like as much as you can, and click the notifications bell, and you'll be inundated with content constantly about the natural world and what Coyote's trying to do to educate people, and all the different conservation bits and pieces that he champions so much. So yeah, really check that out. It's a really, really cool channel, and the content is a constant stream. It really is. I mean, every time I log into YouTube, bam, there's another Brave Wilderness piece of content. But yeah, that was so cool. I mean, check it out, please do. If you guys want to help support the podcast, please like, subscribe, share it wherever you can. Leave a review. Reviews are always really good feedback. That would be great. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening once again. More content is coming your way. We're going to have another update very soon, but yeah, we're still going through the list of different people to talk to, and the Animal A to Z is going to be out soon as well. So yeah, stick around for that. But until next time, stay safe.